Hello, my fellow pirates and adventurers. Today, we're making a trek back to Tombstone, Arizona to meet up with an old friend at the poker table. John Doc Henry Holliday, the dentist turned gambler from Georgia, the best friend to the legendary lawman known as Wyatt Earp. A man who needs no introduction unless it's in Latin to threaten somebody on the other side of the bar. So, let's go ahead and take a look at the real history that inspired the performance of the late great Val Kilmer.
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
Doc Holliday was born as John Henry Holliday on August 14th, 1851 in Griffin, Georgia. Came from a very respectable Southern family. His father, Henry Burroughs Holliday, was a Confederate officer and a respectable lawyer, while his mother, Alice Jane McKee, came from a well-to-do background. Holliday was born with a cleft palate, which was corrected through surgery and speech therapy at a young age, giving him a very refined and articulate manner that contrasted sharply with the rough reputation he would later earn. He was intelligent, well-educated, and raised with expectations of becoming a professional gentleman. Following those expectations, Holliday would attend dental school at Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery, graduating in 1872. He began practicing dentistry short after, earning the nickname Doc. However, his life took a dramatic turn when he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, the same disease that claimed his mother's life. Doctors gave him only a short time to live and advised him to move west to a drier climate. The diagnosis effectively ended his dental career, pushed him towards a far more dangerous lifestyle. As Holliday moved through Texas and the American Southwest, he became deeply involved in the gambling and saloon culture, which provided income and suited his declining health better than dentistry. He gained a reputation as a deadly gambler and a gunman. Though historians debate how many men he actually killed, what is clear is that Holliday was extremely loyal to his friends and came quick to violence when he felt threatened. His sharp wit, his icy demeanor, and willingness to kill made him a feared presence in the frontier towns. Holliday's legacy became firmly cemented through his close friendship with Wyatt Earp, one of the most famous lawmen of the Old West. The two formed a strong bond based on a mutual respect and loyalty, with Holliday repeatedly standing up and standing by Earp during violent confrontations. This partnership famously culminated in the events surrounding the gunfight of the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona in 1881. Though the actual gunfight was brief, its aftermath, including vendettas and revenge killings, defined Holliday's most notorious period. Doc Holliday had spent his final years weakened by tuberculosis, increasingly frail and far removed from the violent reputation that followed him. He died on November 8, 1887 in Glenwood Springs, Colorado at the age of 36. Ironically, despite living the most of his adult life expecting to die violently, he passed away in a bed, reportedly amused by the twist of fate. Today, Doc Holliday remains one of the Old West's most complex figures, a tragic blend of gentleman outlaw, loyal friend, and a dying man racing against time.
You're a daisy if you do.
Now we're at the part of the video where we discuss the person/character in question. Now, the first question we always ask is, how was I introduced to the character? Well, also unknowingly, not realizing he was actually a real person. When I was young, I remember, let's say about probably 10 or 11 years old, my father sat me down and said, we need to watch Tombstone. You're going to enjoy it. It's one of the best Western movies that you will ever see. I remember sitting down distinctively, and the one character that captivated me the whole time, and I believe it's probably a lot of people who watched the film, was Doc, Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday. And that was the first time I ever saw what a Southern gentleman looked like, what it meant to have that very distinguished palette of words, but also very gruff in attitude, in action as well. He was somebody else, and I always wanted to be a guy like him that, when needed to be the loyal friend, needed to be that kind of person in the moment. And I always go back and have fond memories of watching that movie, and I still do. My favorite line, and I have a shirt of it, and I wish I wore it. And I recently got it over at the State Fair a couple of months ago over in Tulsa. It was, "I'm your Huckleberry." That means I'm your guy. And, well, in the scene, he was more so taunting Johnny Ringo, but I like to hear it as also, "I'm the guy" as well. I'm the guy that'll do what needs to be done kind of ordeal. And it's very interesting. And so this brings us to the next question, to kind of not to hurry things along too much, but why does this version of Doc last a very long time in people's minds? Well, first off, Val Kilmer's performance. Understandably, he was, I believe, I forgot the acting method it was called, but it's something that Heath Ledger used to develop his Joker. But in and off the set, he was always in character, and never stopped being the character. Method acting, that's it. I think it was a form of method acting. I don't think he went that far, and, unfortunately, sometimes method acting can be a little bit too much for some folks. And unfortunately too much for the person using it. For instance, with Heath Ledger, as mentioned before, and in a way, yes, it kind of did affect Val Kilmer here and there, because he legitimately almost fainted almost every time on the set due to the way that he lost a lot of weight. He was sweating profusely. It's hot. They're wearing a lot of layers in Arizona. I believe they filmed in Arizona, but and I think the way he plays this version of Doc, it's not necessarily the most, I wouldn't say historically accurate, because we don't know how exactly. We only believe that, hey, he was a very refined Southern gentleman in history. And so I think they really brought that to life, the very aristocratic but yet very gruff manner, that the way he carries himself. It's a very interesting dynamic. You think being an aristocrat would make you kind of like a very weakened person, but that's the funny thing. He never ever showed that at all. It's like the exact opposite of the guy you think would be, weak, an aristocrat or a Southern gentleman. Most of the time they are kind of that person that just doesn't get behind things. What's funny is the sheriff is more of that kind of character. The more and more I think about it, the more and more I look at it, and it's kind of interesting. You'd think, oh, this kind of not very arrogant, talkative guy and plain speaking guy would be that type of person to be there and be that person, but no. It's what's interesting is the movie kind of subverts your expectations a little bit. At first, when you get introduced to this version of Doc, it's like, wow. It's like you don't know if you really should like him or not. And it's kind of a slow burn. I didn't really like him at first either. A lot of folks don't. And I remember watching earlier today, before making this, I was watching some Doc Holliday stuff, watching some scenes, rewatching, and getting more idea of what I missed as a 10 or 11-year-old that went over my head. And I just listened to his dialogue. It's such a very interesting thing. He's a very intricate, but yet very pushy character. And so the way he performed it, Val Kilmer performed it, is I would say, more importantly, really made this character who he is. The way he spoke the dialogue, the way he carried himself as somebody that didn't demand respect, but knew he was respected. And more importantly, he had a lot of weight with his name. And it reminds me of the scene that I saw recently as well in this compilation, where he sees this guy carrying a shotgun heading towards the Earp brothers in the movie. And this is before they set up their Pharaoh game and all that in the saloon and stuff. And he's walking up and he has a problem with the Earp brothers. I forgot why. I need to rewatch Tombstone again at some point. It's still one of my favorite movies. And Holliday calls out the man's name. His name is Jack. And he goes, "Jack, what you got there?" And trying to grab his attention. It was such an interesting thing. He grabs the attention of the guy holding the shotgun, and then he realizes who Jack's pointing the shotgun, and it's like, oh, it's my friends. It's Wyatt and my brother, and they act like old buddies, which they are. They act like old buddies, and they're just like, "Oh, how you doing?" And my favorite line, he says, "Wyatt, I'm rolling." The way it's delivered, it basically tells you I'm doing very well, and I'm happy to see you, kind of ordeal. I don't know what "I'm rolling" means. I need to look that up, but it is such a really cool line. And just not only just the in-between between him and Wyatt, and the camaraderie between the other two brothers as well, is such a really interesting idea to be seen, because it's like a lot of people tend to not really pay attention to Kurt Russell's Wyatt Earp, which is, don't get me wrong, Kurt Russell's a fantastic actor. He's not just an action actor. He knows how to play good characters, and he played a great Wyatt. He didn't play the Wyatt from history, though. That was Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp, which I'm going to mention in a little bit. And why that version that Kevin Costner directed, it worked. It was more... I'll mention this. I'll make this kind of an asterisk point. That version, the Wyatt Earp version of Doc Holliday, was not bad. It wasn't the worst performance. They had a great actor. He literally just genuinely looked like the old photos if you look at him. While, of course, Val Kilmer, did his best, and he looked great. A lot of the hats, I believe, were a little bit more historically accurate. I don't know what kind of hats they all wore. A lot of the time, people prefer the Tombstone hats over the Wyatt Earp hats, because, if I'm honest, the Wyatt Earp hats are a little goofy. Especially for Wyatt. I don't know why that was a thing. I didn't even know that hat was real. I always thought it was off of old cowboy cartoons and not real life, but I guess I was wrong about that. And so, with that version of Doc Holliday, I enjoy that version. But you're not being Val Kilmer. There's a reason why people remember Tombstone over Wyatt Earp. And Kevin Costner's a great actor. Kevin Costner is a great director so far from what I've watched him. I've grown up with Kevin Costner. I've grown up with Kurt Russell. But I prefer Tombstone due to the fact that Doc had a little bit more of a prominent role, which makes sense. Not that he didn't in the previous film, but it just seems like he's kind of splotched here and there. Because it's like a 3-hour movie. It's not just talking about the events of Tombstone. It's talking the events of before Tombstone, how Wyatt became the man he was, and also on top of not really paying attention too much to Doc. It's more like he shows up kind of halfway through the movie and just eventually starts developing more and more of the friendship that you would see. But it's like with Tombstone, Doc's like apparent throughout the entire movie. He's there on purpose, deliberate, and he's in the scene all the time. And historically wise, no, it's not entirely accurate. Heck, I wouldn't even say the Wyatt Earp one's going to be entirely accurate. It's a little bit more, I would say, to certain things, especially the way that they handled certain events. However, in both, I will still say both have a very solid Doc Holliday. And so this brings us to our next question. How much historical significance does the real Doc Holliday have? Very much real, a lot of significance for a lot of people who enjoyed, like, not only just enjoy like Old West movies. If they enjoy Old West history, they can really see the apparent reality of who he was. The way that Val Kilmer displays the character, he's always in the moment. He's intentionally, constantly living in the moment. And so we don't know how this man was, except Wyatt Earp in his memoirs. Wyatt Earp ended up actually living the longest out of the bunch of them. I believe he lived up till 1901 or 1902, which is just wild to think about. And he ended up, and that's a whole different story, but I'll at least mention this, like, even with the way that Doc was also, which, yes, he did die at 36, as mentioned in the history part. He dies in both movies at the age of 36. 36, guys. He only lived 36 years, and he spent every ounce of it after getting that tuberculosis thing, or tuberculosis diagnosis, just living and making sure he would prolong how long he had left. And displaying it in the movie was such a great idea. Displaying it in both movies, it's showing that he wanted to live. He always wanted to see that. And both movies also show the destructive side of that kind of way of thinking, which is interesting. Is his way of living the life to the fullest was to gamble his life all the time. Gamble on the poker table, drink and smoke like crazy. And the one aspect that, unfortunately, it doesn't undermine his character, but it shows the qualities of what a man of his stature had that were bad. Because, like, look, a lot of his there's a lot of qualities a lot of people can say that were bad. He's stubborn. He is pushy. He is a drunkard. He is a smoker. He is an addict. Gambling addict. There's so much you could say, but yet he still carries himself as that Southern gentleman. He still carries himself as that serious guy. And he's ironically the most reliable guy despite having this condition. Which is reflected in history. And so the more and more I look at it, and this kind of goes into the phase of the next question, is it's like, and I'll go ahead and ask you, what does his story mean to me? And it's understanding life is precious. Life is precious, and you have to be intentional with life and not waste it. And I think Doc realized a lot of what he was doing. Even though he was living to the fullest, he knew is like, I'm still wasting my life. I'm still taking that time. I'm still taking my time away from myself. And he's starting to realize the destructive lifestyle he has. And the more and more as he was getting more and more understanding in the story of Tombstone, and then in the story, more so in the story of Tombstone, you realize Doc is realizing my life is coming to an end soon, and I've got to help my friend. I've got to stop being this guy that's being ridiculous. I've got to get off all this stuff and go help him take out these men that have butchered his family. And I think it's the reality, and it's interesting because it's literally a similar story to another character from another Western series, game series, Red Dead Redemption 2, which I think is deliberate. Arthur Morgan, which is literally verbatim what happens to the real John Doc Holliday. And it's interesting because you see both moments. It's like, okay, now I'm finally accepting, yeah, I could die. I could genuinely die tomorrow. And to finally accept that and realize I've got to change is such an interesting concept for a character who's been so tough and gruff and done all these things in his life. And I think he realizes, even with him being a more loyal friend at the end of the day, I think the reason why he became that loyal friend is realized my life is coming to an end. And I've got to be able to leave something better on this earth than just me being a gambler, me killing a load of people. I've got to do something better with this. And so, I mean, I don't know the real thoughts of the original John Doc Holliday. He could have thought those thoughts. He could have had all these thoughts. We don't know too much about the real one, except from, as mentioned before, the memoirs of Wyatt Earp, which he made in I think actually he lived up to the 1930s. Now that I think about it, because it was 19 something that he ended up moving to Alaska and getting a gold mining business with his new wife Josie. And excuse me, I'm gonna get some water real quick. If I can unscrew it. And so having a story like Doc's be displayed in more of a dramatic manner and more of a, I wouldn't say sympathetic manner, I would say in a respectable manner. It gives more honor and respect to the person who was that man. And let's be honest, being around a type of man like that, yeah, you would think he's a terrible guy. You would think he's a scoundrel, he's a hooligan, he's a person that does not need to be given the chance to even be a friend with somebody, but yet he'd proven even through his history that he can be that person. And for me, I really, really respect that story because a lot of it, I never went through a lot of what he went through. And it reminds me a lot of past where I made a lot of regrets and mistakes. And I've had to think about it a lot because, look, 11 years from now, I'll be the same age as he was when he died. And he left something behind that was such a interesting story and made his history known through his best friend. And so it's such an interesting idea for me to really discuss this character again, because the last time I did it, it was at the beginning. It was kind of on the cuff. I didn't really have anything record or scripted, and it was more kind of raw in the moment. And yeah, it was interesting. And now this kind of brings us to the next question somewhat for the future. And you know how I usually ask, it's like, oh, what do I hope for the future? And it's more of a question of, would I like to see another version of Doc Holliday? I thought about this earlier, and I never realized how big the question is. The more and more I think about it, do we need to see another version of Doc Holliday? My answer is I don't know. I mean, it depends on the actor, depends on who's writing it, of course, but it's like, I would like to see more stuff with Doc in it, but I don't know if they can recreate, if we can get the same, not same feel or the same performance, but I don't know if somebody can be able to replicate that very meaningful way of life for that character. Because a lot of the time, people are going to display that as, oh, all this qualities equal a horrible human being, which it's true, but even a horrible human being can realize how quickly his life is turning around, like just like Arthur Morgan, who he's roughly based off of Doc. And it's I would in a way, and I wouldn't, because it would feel like it would kind of sully the story of the original, or the history, the actual historical Doc Holliday almost, but also sully the performances of both of the actors as well. But it would have to be in order for that not to happen, it would have to be in such a manner where it's different but yet familiar, if that makes sense. It has to be poignant, it has to be something different, but yet it's still the same character. And I'm not saying go, and please hear me when I say this, do not wokeify Doc Holliday. Don't make a friendship into a gay relationship. Don't do that. We don't need that. That disrespects a lot of history if you do so. If someone does that. I do not support LGBTQ stuff. I don't, personally. I think it goes against my beliefs, and I want to say this to preface this. It is your choice how you want to live your life. I may disagree with it, but do not put it in stories that already have historical significance, because too many people have messed it up so many times. Especially Netflix, especially these high production studios that try to make historical accurately things with some woke ideas which do not work. When you're making historical fact the story, you need to make sure it goes along with the history, because history has story in it. The word story is in history. You cannot disrespect that. And so I would say it has to be the right person to direct it, the right person to act in it, and most importantly, the right time. Because right now we're in a time where we're getting away from that woke garbage. And I don't really want to see a John Doc Holliday be turned into a wokeified sissy of a man.
You know Daisy. You know Daisy at all.
The legend of Doc Holliday has been around for a very long time. Whether it's being presented in the iconic movie of Tombstone, or Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp, or even in his best friend's memoirs, a man who had a disease that cut his life in half and lived like there is no tomorrow. But yet, very interestingly, he died like a person of his condition, being taken care of in a bed with his boots off. And not out in the West, being killed by another shootist with a death wish. What's interesting is, while he was in Colorado, in Glenwood Springs, he sits in his bed, staring at his feet, thinking that he could have been killed by another shootist. He could have been killed by another person with his boots on. And before he dies, before he passes away, he goes, funny, and passes on. Rescripted in pace. Glad we got a chance to talk about Doc again in a more proper format for a video. And maybe down the line we'll talk about more Western legends, whether historical or fictional. Thank you guys for joining me today. If you enjoyed the discussion and wish to be a part of the Bernhard Pirate Brigade, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell to be notified of future uploads. Thank you again. This is the Captain signing off. I bid you adieu. I'm out. Peace.